Hello, welcome back to my channel. So in this video, we'll be focusing on the UiPath Document Understanding Solution Architecture. This is actually the first part of a series of videos that's coming up that will specifically focus on the solution design, how you can build effective and scalable solution using UiPath Document Understanding Template. So before getting into the template and understanding how it works and how you can use it in your document understanding solutions, let's first get a high level idea about how the overall structure will look like. So, when it comes to UiPath document understanding or document processing in general, what we can think of is we can have three different components. One could be the source where we get these documents. And the second one could be the document understanding solution itself, where you do the extraction and processing. Third one could be once you have the extracted data, what you do with it. You need to probably log into some application and put or upload all that information there. So in general, we can see three different solutions or three different processes that connect to each other. So if we look at the source, from where can we get this information? It could be a shared drive that has all the documents that we need to process, or it could be um, a source application where we need to look for this information. So you might need to log into this application, do some filtering, download the files that you need to process. And it can be different sources, or it could be a cloud environment as well, like Google Drive, for example. So wherever it is, you need to connect to that environment and identify the documents that you need to process. And then once you have that data, we need to put it into some place saying that this is the whole list of documents that I need to process. So usually when it comes to document processing, we do it regularly, like daily, for example. So in that case, we will probably connect to these applications, identify the new documents each day, and we need to put it somewhere saying that these are the documents I need to process. Why we need to do that? Because the sources could be uh, multiple, it could be multiple sources like shared drives and so on, and even multiple applications that you need to connect to. So instead of um, some process going into each and every application and then getting directly from there, what you can do is you can have separate processors or separate UiPath solutions that specifically focus on those systems and extract or download that files into a specific folder maybe, and then update that information somewhere like in a UiPath orchestrator queue, for example. So wherever it is coming from, you put it into one place, and that's where you're going to store the entire list of files that needs to be processed. So you might think that in that way, this search any sources could be multiple. Like for each system, you might have a different process. It could be, and if you can do that, that would be the best design because then for each solution or for each system that you're interacting with, you have a dedicated process that is separate from everything else. So if you need to change anything, that's the only thing that you're going to change. So that way, You get all the documents and put it into a queue. And this queue could be a orchestrator queue, it could be an Excel file, it could be a database, it could be something on data service, it could be anything. Just you just need to put it into some place where you can keep track of what is being processed and what is yet to be processed, sort of. So once you have that in one place, then you can use that to connect with your next process, which is the actual document understanding process. So in this one, let's say you have everything in a queue, for example. So once you have it, you get each item from a queue, you do the classification, extraction, validation, and then once you have the validated information, you need to again pass it to another process, which is updating the destination wherever it is. It could be Excel file, it could be some internal applications, it could be anything, depending on your process. So to pass that information to that particular process, that also needs to be stored somewhere because that part is not handled in the document understanding flow, which is the second one here. The reason is there need to be that separation because it interacts with different applications. And when it comes to document processing, like digitizing, classifying, validating, it doesn't need to interact with any other application. So that part has to be separate and it needs to run in the background. So that's one reason for this particular thing to be separate from the other stuff and to be connected via queues or any other data transferring mechanism. So once you have that information, you can you can export that validated info and again put it to a queue or maybe a database or whatever. So once you have that, then all you need to do is get it from there and then update the other applications like the different internal applications. It could be anything. It could be a web application, it could be a desktop application, it could be an Excel file, it could be anything. So that is a separate process. So now you can see in general we have three processes. One is to collect the documents, the other one is to actually process it, and lastly, when we have the information, to update other applications. And there can also be scenarios where you need to update into multiple applications. So in that case, just like we discussed about the source, we can also do the same approach for your destination. You might have different processes to do that, but all that refers to one source where the document understanding flow goes and uploads its extracted information. So this is the overall architecture. So there are few things to consider when designing a solution. So I'm not referring to the classification techniques, the extraction techniques, whether it's the machine learning or form extractor or those stuff. That's a different thing. Here we only focus on the design, how you connect this and why we need to do it in this way. So usually when it comes to document processing, these are very manual activities and it's being done manually for a long time. So there can be a huge backlog as well. So whenever you're designing this kind of a solution, if the business team say that you have a backlog and you need to support that, to support the processing of the backlog and also the daily activities, you need to consider that in your solution. And the next one, exception handling. So usually what happens is when you try to process documents, let's assume for some reason a specific set of documents did not get processed due to some error. So how can you retry that? Because in a day you might process like thousands of documents. We don't know. So when that happens, and if you have a list of documents that got failed, you need to have a mechanism to identify those documents and retry those. So that's a part of the overall architecture. And then how about a scenario like this? So you have the process that you take the documents from a queue, you extract and do everything. But let's assume a specific document got failed, but the user did not get the time to look at it to see what actually happened. So after about 3 or 4 days, he comes back, and for some urgent requirement, he needs to see where this document is, and he realizes that it failed few days back. So now he need to immediately process that document and get that result because he needs to finish some work urgently. So in such scenarios, can we wait for this scheduled run to happen? No. So because it will take the data from the latest documents that it needs to process, and it will run at a specific time. But due to this urgency, if you have that option available in the existing process, the user could easily give that document path and process that document right at that moment. It's not the only reason to have that option. It could be that, but it could also be like user has a list of documents that failed like few days back and he likes to process them manually to see. So in that case, he can also do the same thing. He can just give the file path and let it process within the same run. There can be any or like multiple reasons to have that option. And I have seen it in many use cases where it's fully automated. You take the information from a queue. But I have seen this requirement where the user also needs to process specific documents in the same process, but they need an option to give that instead of using the queue or the usual data sources. So that's another reason. The other reason is scalability and efficiency. So when it comes to scalability, we need to be able to process any kind of or any number of documents efficiently, and this has to be distributed within multiple machines if possible. So if we have enough licenses, we can easily run this thing parallelly in multiple machines. So our design should support that. And then the other one is the flexibility to easily plug in new document types into this workflow and to add different business rules, customize your business rules. So we need to have provision for these things. And lastly, how about running it as attended or unattended? This might not be the case for every use case, but there can be scenarios where this is useful. So how can we achieve all these things in our design? So that's where we get into this document understanding template. So to get to that, let me get back to the design diagram I showed you earlier. So we were here before. Now thinking about those things, processing the backlog, allowing the user to include documents to process, like bypassing the source itself. Those things can be done in this architecture. How you can do that? So this is the usual process. You have a set of source applications, you get the document, put it into a queue, and process it. But If the user wants to give the file path and process it, this is where the user is going to come in. So the user will directly interact with the document understanding flow itself without interacting with the source. So that's where you need to have that provision enabled. So the user can easily give the file path through that job as an argument and then get it processed. And then comes the backlog. How about processing the backlog using the same process? So if you see here in the source section, you are saying update process queue. If we follow this architecture, we can add that information, the backlog, into the same process queue. Or else you can replicate or get a copy of this document understanding process, configure it to look at a different queue in the orchestrator maybe, and include the entire backlog items there so that you have two processes running looking at two different queues. One is for your daily run and the other one is for your backlog. So that way your daily run is not affected and you also get the backlog processed. But you are not doing any code change. It's just a simple configuration to look at a different queue. Or you can add everything to the same queue and you can get it processed. So you can see how flexible it is when you follow this architecture. So when I say a process, I'm referring to the separate processes that we have in the orchestrator. Like you can trigger different jobs. So for example, if this document understanding is a separate process, and we have options to options for the user to enter the file path during the job execution. So in the jobs page in Orchestrator, you have that argument option where you can provide that information. So if you do that, you can just run this part of the process and get that document processed. So that's the benefit of using such kind of a architecture. So this is achieved through UiPath Document Understanding Framework. You have everything inbuilt in the framework. So you can easily customize your validation logic. You can run it as attended or unattended. And you can even do this scheduling and backlog thing. How it is done? The main thing here is it follows a specific concept. It's called one job per document. So every job that you trigger in the orchestrator will only um, process one document. I'm not referring to the source or the destination. I'm referring only to this part where you process the document. So this concept is what helps us to scale and do all these things. So why this concept? Why can't we put everything in one, just like in the RE framework, loop through and process? It's not possible because here we talk about hundreds and thousands of data documents. And if we are to scale it, if we are to process all these things parallelly, we should be able to run the jobs parallelly in multiple places, even with high priority levels to prioritize certain documents. So to do that, we need to have this concept in place. So that way you can run multiple jobs at the same time if you have the proper license and then get these documents processed. So it is much more effective and much more efficient in terms of execution. So that being said, now let's quickly look at the document understanding template. So on this video, I'm not going to go into very detail in this template, but in the following videos, as I said, this is a series. In the following videos, I will explain each and every section of this template and show you how you can configure these things to achieve much more in your document processing, how you can plug in more components into this, and how you can configure this into to address different requirements. I'll show you all those things in the following videos, focusing on specific areas like digitizing, classifying, and extraction, and many other things. So just for this video, I'll just take you uh, through the high level structure. So here you can see, if you look at this part carefully, you can see two arrows. So that means you can execute either of these two documents. But this is the main XML file, but you can run either of these through your orchestrator or through a system. So what happens here is you have the read config file, you initialize your process, and here is the option. See, we have two input arguments. Through this, the user can give the file path if he wants to process any specific document, or else you can get it from the queue itself. And then you do the digitizing, you do the classification, you do the rule check for classification, the business rules, you do the training, you do extraction, and end the process. Main thing here is you can see it's not going back to get transaction item just like in the RE framework. That is not here. Is the reason for that is because of that concept I told you earlier. One job is for one document, and this is what's going to run when you implement this. So you get the documents from a queue, you process it, and you create some Excel files based on that. But you can easily configure this. And this RE framework is designed in a way where you can configure each and every section easily, and you can build different rules, configure different rules, add business rules, add system specific rules. You can do anything easily in this workflow. So this is what I wanted to cover to on this video. Before getting into the document understanding template, why I cover this part is because I wanted to give you the idea why this DU template has this structure, has this architecture in place. So that's the all the points that we discussed is the reason for that. So in the following videos, we'll see each and every section of this, and I'll tell you how you can easily configure those to address various business requirements. And not just that, here we have reusable workflows, here we have different test cases. I'll talk to you about all this stuff. So I hope this is helpful to understand the overall architecture, how it should be designed when you are working with document understanding or document processing requirements. So always remember to follow that architecture because that helps a lot. And I have practically experienced it myself, and that has helped a lot in processing backlogs and allowing users to process their own documents in the same workflow without having extra developments done. So everything is easy if you follow that architecture. So that being said, I'll wrap up this video. I hope this is helpful. So I'll see you again in another video that focus on different components in the DU template. So thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.